If you intend to be successful in investing, one of the most important things you need is an investment philosophy. What is an investment philosophy? Well, it's simply a set of guiding internal process or systems that helps you recognize opportunities and gives you a pathway to exploring and taking advantage of those opportunities. But it's also a guiding system that brings to your attention and your awareness where you might have potential danger, risks, and it cautions you on what to do in those extreme scenarios. Now, you and I have philosophies. Now, we may not know what those philosophies are. We may not have those philosophies in writing. But I want you to think about philosophy as simply a way of thinking. You and I think. Now, we may not consciously be aware of how we come to conclusions on the decisions we make based on our thought process, but we still have the process. And all I'm asking and all I'm talking about here is becoming aware of how you make investment decisions. And that is where an investment philosophy comes in. If you look around, in our time right now, but also if you look back in history, one of the things you find out is that there aren't many great philosophers. By that, what I mean is philosophers who have put to writing words or shared their philosophy with others. But in investing, we've had a number of successful investors. And if you study successful investors, one of the things you find that is distinct amongst each and every one of them is that they have a philosophy. Now, there are similarities in their philosophies, but interestingly, there are unique differences because each person thinks differently. Now, you need, if you're going to be an investor, more importantly, if you want to be an active investor, you need to know what your investment philosophy is. The best way I can describe this is in two parts. Firstly, I want you to imagine that you're going to be traveling from, say, London to Los Angeles. It might take a number of hours. And most times what the pilot will do is put on an automatic pilot system. As soon as the flight gets to perhaps a reasonable altitude and a stable altitude, the automatic pilot system is activated. And that system will take the plane, keep the plane on a flight path, irrespective of turbulence and irrespective of all the gale forces, irrespective of all the wind pressure and all external conditions. The plane, as soon as it starts to deviate from its path, is brought back in line with its flight path. It's corrected. It's like a correction system. Your philosophy works in the same way. The difference is, the stronger your philosophy and the more aware that you are about your philosophy, the better it can actually guide you towards staying consistent with your desires, your dreams, and your goals. Now, the purpose of investing is to put money out to get more money back in return. It's really that simple. And what your philosophy helps do is it helps you construct a foundation upon which the strategies and the activities and the execution plans you're going to be maybe taking or making will have something that it anchors on, something strong. So personally, I think of a philosophy, in my case, as solving two or doing two important things. One, it helps me think. It helps me process ideas and information. All of the investment opportunities that come to you will, in many cases, overwhelm you if you don't have an investment philosophy. But more importantly, if you don't have an investment philosophy, what you tend to find is anyone out there can come to you and say there is a new opportunity, there's a new scheme whereby you can get wealthy or you can get rich. And they'll perhaps trick you into perhaps putting out your hard-earned money. And in many cases, most people fall for that simply because they don't have a philosophy. So they react emotionally and perhaps they make decisions that they wouldn't have made had they taken the time to allow their philosophy to guide their thinking. So I look at my philosophy in investing, and I hope you do as well. I look at my philosophy from the point of view that it helps me process ideas. It helps me gather all the information and opportunities and helps me identify where the good opportunities are. It helps me identify where the potential risks and problems might be. It guides me towards following the good opportunities. It prevents me from following the negative opportunities. And guess what? More than anything, it brings my emotion into check. You see, we're emotional. And emotions are certainly not your friend when it comes to investing. And your investment philosophy is what helps you keep your emotions in check. And one of the things that I try to do with my philosophy is use it as a checklist. Now, every time a pilot is going to take off from a location to a desired destination, irrespective of the amount of experience they have, one of the things they must do is go through a pre-flight checklist. Now, the pilot understands something that is critical. He or she cannot leave such a very important responsibility to memory and experience alone. So they go through a pre-flight checklist and they, step by step, go through what needs to be checked before they set flight. Now, what I find really, really inspiring and powerful is that when the pilot arrives at the desired destination, they've arrived. They pull out the same checklist and they go through what's called a post-flight checklist. Now, you and I, if we take our philosophies and we convert those philosophies into written words, we capture it in writing, they become principles. Now, once they're written down, they can be used as checklists, whereby an opportunity comes your way, you review the investment opportunity against your checklist. That is one side of what a philosophy does. Now, I want to talk about the second side because I think it's even more important. On the first part, you're dealing internally. It helps you internally. It's all about you. Interestingly, your thoughts becomes expressed. First of all, they become feelings. Those feelings are manifested through actions. Your decisions become actions. So, the second part of your philosophy, what it does for you is it helps you recognize and understand the investment market. Now, that's really powerful, you see, because in every market you have a buyer and you have a seller. And also you have the conditions of that market. Kind of really simple. There are rules to the market. There are things you have to understand, macro and micro. And your philosophy is it's like a lens. It tells you and helps you understand each market. And it helps you make the decisions that are appropriate at the right time, depending on the market. And more importantly, depending on the market conditions. Now let's make it more practical so that you can understand. If you want to make money in investing, irrespective of the investment category or asset class you choose, the way you make money is by identifying and recognizing where the market has made a mistake. And then you take advantage of the mistake. Now, let's make that practical. Let's say in real estate or property investing, you want to buy a property. The property has been priced. The price is the market price. Now, you want to buy the property. You as the investor have to do a due diligence, do a valuation, do an assessment, appraise the property, and see if you can identify, number one, where the intrinsic value is. Number two, and more importantly, whether the market has recognized that the intrinsic value is worth a certain price and whether that price is either much more than the market price. Whenever you spot that, in many cases, you've identified an inefficiency in the market. It could simply be the fact that the person who has appraised the property has simply done what's called a comparisons analysis. They've looked at a property across the road that they've sold previously, or someone else has sold, or someone else has bought, and they've simply said, the two properties are alike. We'll use the floor area of the properties and we'll prorata the sale prices. But what they may not have done is they may not have gone a step further of trying to identify what makes this new property unique. What are its strengths? What are the benefits? They may not have used the power of imagination to see what could be done with this property. What gives it more charm? What makes it, what is its, what I call MVP? you can spot that as a market error, an inefficiency, and take advantage of it. By doing that, what you simply do is you pay a price, perhaps below the market price, but more importantly, below the intrinsic value. So your philosophy guides you. Firstly, you might have a philosophy that is built on the fact that markets make mistakes. And therefore, all you have to do is find and identify where there are mistakes in the market, take advantage of it. On the other hand, you could also have a different philosophy where you believe that markets never make mistakes. And so you might take a different approach. But the point I'm trying to make is this. Your philosophy is like a lens. On the external, it helps you understand what's going on in the market. It helps you recognize perhaps opportunities and danger. Then with those ideas that come to you and with the opportunities you've identified, you can make a decision. So let me draw this to a conclusion by saying this. If you want to be an investor, you need an investment philosophy. The investment philosophy you choose doesn't have to be completely yours. Now, I know that sounds a little bit perhaps not too clear. Let me clarify what I mean by that. We've had so many years of great investors who have proven years after years that they are really competent in what they do. You can decide through the process that we call modeling, where you simply say, I don't have the luxury of time to go through the failing and trying and failing and trying only to find out what works. So what I'm simply going to do is study those who have been exceptional, the best. I'm going to study their strategies, I'm going to study their philosophies, I'm going to study their habits and actions, and I'm going to try and replicate what they've done. Because actions create results, and therefore if they've done certain things consistently to get certain results, then likewise, if you apply the same approach, then you should get something similar. So you can actually borrow someone else's philosophy. Now think about this. That shouldn't come as a surprise to you, because if you are of age whereby you can make decisions for yourself, whatever you might call your philosophies, and to an extent some of your habits and your beliefs are borrowed. They were embedded in you long before you had the opportunity to make and the ability to make decisions for yourself. In this case, what I'm simply saying is be more conscious and select the right philosophy. Find those who are great at what they do and try to glean from their wisdom. Perhaps you could borrow their philosophies, but here is the most important thing. You must select a philosophy that works, a philosophy that has been tested, that has been proven, that fundamentally works in the market. More importantly, you must recognize that you're unique. You have a different personality, you have a different set of skills. Therefore, you must tailor the philosophy to you, to your character, to your style, perhaps to your degree of temperament, because the way you think is different from the way I think. So the first step is identify and get yourself a great philosophy for investing. Secondly, tailor that philosophy to who you are, to your style, to your level of patience. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, know thyself. If you go to the temple in Apollo, there are two words inscribed, know thyself. Now, to know yourself, you have to study yourself. And that simply means that one of the important things you need as an investor is know who you are. Now, if you're going to know yourself, you've got to study yourself. But studying yourself doesn't mean that you've come to the end of the journey. You now have to be that person you've studied. And doing that means you combine action with philosophy, and that brings you to a point where you can now say with certainty that I have my own philosophies, and if you do and when you do, all you have to do is capture it in writing and then use it as a set of guidance system, as a checklist, a pre-flight checklist before you invest. You review your philosophy and your principles. Once you've invested, you give yourself some time and some room whereby you can come back and say, after a month, after 6 months, after 12 months, after 2 years, or whatever it might be, You sit down and you say, knowing what I know now, based on the philosophy and the perhaps decisions that I made back then, do I still think it was the best decision to have made? Now, this is even more important because what it helps you do is it helps you start to fine-tune your philosophy. Because in many cases, there are times when you're making decisions, but you don't have everything available in terms of all of the information you need. Hindsight is a gift. But you and I have to sit down, review hindsight, what we've learned, the experiences, the opportunities, and ask ourselves, knowing what I know now, if I had the opportunity to make the same decision again, would I use the same philosophies? If you're going to succeed in investing, you need a philosophy.